When it comes to the silent battle of no contact versus no contact, the first thing you need to understand is that the one who holds their ground the longest ultimately wins. It's not about who cares more or who has stronger feelings. It's about who has the strength to resist the temptation of breaking silence first. The truth is, silence can feel unbearable, especially when emotions run high and your mind is screaming at you to do something, to reach out, to fix the situation. But if you give in to that impulse, you show your hand too early, and in doing so, you give away your power. Holding your ground is the test, and those who pass it are the ones who come out of the silent battle stronger, more respected, and ultimately in control. Patience is the weapon you must rely on. Every day you remain silent, you reinforce the message that you are not desperate, that you are not dependent on someone else's validation for your sense of peace. This is what separates the strong from the weak in these kinds of battles. The strong wait. The strong trust the process. The strong understand that the pressure of silence eventually shifts from you to the other person. At first, she may feel comfortable thinking she has the upper hand, but as time passes, that comfort begins to turn into unease. Questions creep into her mind. Doubt begins to form. And the more you resist the urge to break your silence, the more she feels the need to end hers. This is why discipline matters more than desire. You may want to reach out because you care, because you miss her, or because you simply want the conflict to be over. But desire is not enough. It's discipline that counts. Discipline is what reminds you that breaking silence doesn't solve the problem. It only exposes your inability to stay strong. Discipline teaches you to let the other person wonder, to let the other person feel the absence, and to show that your time, attention, and energy are valuable things that cannot be demanded, they must be earned. Think of silence like a mirror. If you hold it up long enough, it reflects the truth back at the other person. Your silence makes her examine her own actions, her own feelings, and her own place in your life. But if you shatter that silence too quickly, you interrupt the process before it even has a chance to work. That's why holding your ground is not just about waiting. It's about trusting the power of silence to do its job. The one who breaks first is the one who loses balance, the one who shows that the silence was too heavy to carry. But the one who endures shows inner strength, calm, and patience. And in relationships, those qualities are rare and magnetic. That's why the power of holding your ground in the silent battles, everything, it transforms silence from something that feels like punishment into something that becomes your greatest weapon. The second key point in the silent battle of no contact versus no contact is understanding the shift in psychological pressure. At the beginning, it might feel like you're the one carrying the burden. You feel the silence pressing down on you, making you restless, overthinking, and questioning whether she even cares. That's the trap most people fall into. They assume the silence means indifference. But what actually happens is that silence creates a vacuum, and a vacuum always demands to be filled. At first, the weight of that emptiness sits on your chest, but as time passes, the balance shifts, and she begins to feel it even more strongly than you do. What you need to realize is that silence speaks volumes. Every unanswered text, every call you don't make, every message you resist sending is a message in itself. It says, I am strong enough to stand on my own. I do not need you to feel complete. If you want my attention, you will have to earn it. And whether she admits it or not, she hears it. That quiet discipline you show starts to echo in her mind. She may brush it off at first, telling herself she's fine without you, but over time, the silence grows louder than any words you could have spoken. This is why patience is so critical. Most men fail here because they expect results too quickly. They think a week of silence will bring her running back, but it doesn't always work that way. Depending on her personality, her level of pride, and how much she values you, it might take longer. That's where endurance separates the strong from the weak. If you can endure the silence without caving in, eventually the psychological pressure flips. She starts to wonder, why isn't he reaching out? Did I lose him? Has he moved on? Does he even care anymore? And those questions slowly eat away at her confidence. The longer you hold back, the more her imagination takes over. She begins to remember the little things, the conversations, the moments, the way you made her feel. And in that silence, she realizes she misses it. That's when she begins to feel the need to close the gap. That's when she starts thinking about contacting you just to see if you're still there. The mistake would be to break the silence before that shift happens. If you do, you rob yourself of the power that silence was building for you. But if you wait, if you stay composed and let her feel the weight of your absence, the silence becomes unbearable for her, not for you. And in that moment, the silent battle is won. Not because you said or did anything, but because you had the strength to let the silence work in your favor. That is the true beauty of the psychological shift, when the silence that once felt heavy on you begins to weigh even more heavily on her. The third key point in the silent battle of no contact versus no contact is all about who breaks first. And this is where the true test of inner strength comes in. When both people go silent, it isn't just about who can hold out the longest. It's about who can control their emotions, who can stay grounded in self-respect, and who refuses to let ego or fear dictate their actions. At first, silence can feel like torture. Exactly. Every day you don't reach out, there's a small voice inside telling you to break it, to send just one text, to get a response that reassures you she still cares. But the one who caves first loses the upper hand, because breaking the silence shows neediness, and neediness always weakens your position. Think about it. If you're the one to send that message first, what does it say? It tells her that the silence got to you more than it got to her. It tells her that you're still waiting on her, still craving her validation. Even if she responds kindly, deep down, she knows she has the power. She knows you broke because you couldn't handle the distance. And that shifts the balance in her favor. That's why winning this silent battle isn't about saying the right words or making some clever move. It's about mastering yourself enough to stay silent even when every bone in your body tells you to speak. On the flip side, when she's the one who breaks first, everything changes. The moment she reaches out, whether it's with a casual message or a direct one, it means she's felt the silence more deeply than you. It means your absence has weighed on her enough to override her pride. And that moment is powerful because it proves that your restraint worked. You didn't have to chase her. You didn't have to convince her of your worth. She came to that realization on her own through the silence you maintain. This is why discipline is everything. Every time you think about reaching out, you have to remind yourself what's at stake. You're not just avoiding a text, you're protecting your power. You're letting her feel your value instead of trying to prove it. That's what gives no contact its real strength. It isn't just about ignoring someone, it's about standing so firmly in your self-worth that you don't need to reach out to feel whole. And that energy is magnetic. The truth is, whoever holds their ground longer in silence proves they have more control over themselves. And self-control is one of the most attractive traits a person can show. So when you're locked in that silent battle, remember this: breaking first gives away your strength, but holding firm forces the other person to face the truth of what your absence really means. And that is how you tip the scales in your favor without saying a single word. Key point 4 in the battle of no contact versus no contact is understanding that silence is not just absence, it's a message, it's communication without words, and the one who knows how to use it wisely always has the upper hand. People often make the mistake of thinking silence means nothing is happening, but in reality, silence is doing the heavy lifting that words could never achieve. When you stay quiet, you give the other person the space to confront their own feelings without interference. She's left with nothing but her thoughts, her doubts, and the echo of your absence. And that can be far more powerful than any long speech or explanation you could ever give. Every time she picks up her phone and doesn't see your name, the silence speaks. Every time she wonders what you're doing, who you're with, or why you haven't reached out, the silence becomes louder. It's not passive, it's active. It builds curiosity, tension, and eventually longing. This is where the silent battle becomes psychological, because while you're focusing on staying grounded and controlling yourself, she's battling her own emotions, her own fear of losing you, her own realization of what your absence really feels like. You break silence too soon, you rob her of that experience. You take away the chance for her to sit with her feelings and truly miss you. But when you hold steady, you allow silence to do its job. The beauty of this is that silence doesn't just affect her, it also strengthens you. It trains you to be comfortable in stillness, to detach from the need for instant gratification, and to place your value above temporary reassurance. That shift in mindset makes you more confident, more composed, and far more attractive than someone who's constantly chasing and over-explaining. The thing about silence is that it demands interpretation. And when she's left to interpret your silence, she'll often imagine scenarios far more powerful than reality. She may think you've moved on, that you're busy building your life, or that you simply don't need her anymore. That thought alone can be enough to trigger her into action, because most people can't stand the idea of being forgotten or replaced. Your silence, in essence, forces her to feel your importance. But remember, silence is only powerful when it's genuine. If you're sitting there counting the hours, waiting for her to break first, that energy bleeds through. Real strength in silence comes from truly focusing on yourself, from genuinely moving forward, from building your life so well that whether she reaches out or not, you're still winning. That authenticity is what makes the silence unshakable. So in this silent war, don't underestimate the power of saying nothing. It isn't weakness, it isn't avoidance, it's strategy. It's giving space for truth to surface and for emotions to deepen without interference. That is how silence becomes your loudest message and your greatest advantage. Key point 5 in the no contact versus no contact battle is about understanding that time is not your enemy, it's your greatest ally. Too often, people think the longer the silence goes on, the weaker their position becomes. They start doubting themselves, asking, what if she forgets me? What if she moves on? What if silence means I lose her completely? But the truth is, if someone can forget you that easily, they were never truly invested in the first place. Time doesn't erase genuine connection, it amplifies it. And in the absence of constant contact, emotions don't disappear, they intensify. Think about it. When you don't have what you're used to, you begin to notice its absence everywhere. If she was used to hearing from you every day, your silence becomes louder with every passing hour. At first, you might feel relieved or even confident, believing that she has the upper hand, but as the days stretch into weeks, the reality starts to set in. She begins to question, why hasn't he called? Why hasn't he chased? Why isn't he reacting the way I thought he would? That curiosity grows into wonder, and that wonder evolves into longing, time in this case works in your favor because it allows her to fully experience the difference between having you and not having you. But here's the deeper truth. Time doesn't just test her, it tests you. The longer you stay silent, the more discipline and self-control you build. It's not just about waiting for her. It's about proving to yourself that you're not dependent on anyone's attention to feel secure. Every day you hold back from breaking no contact is a day you get stronger, more grounded, and more focused on your own growth. That strength is magnetic because it shows her you're not a man easily swayed by temporary emotions or manipulation. Time also has a way of exposing the truth. If she truly values you, silence will pull her back, no matter how strong she tries to appear. But if she doesn't, then her absence only clears the space for someone better to enter your life. Either way, time gives you clarity. It saves you from the trap of chasing after someone who was never meant to stay, and it rewards you by aligning you with the people who actually deserve your energy. So instead of fearing the clock, embrace it. Use the silent days to pour into yourself, your goals, your passions, your growth. When she sees that your world hasn't stopped without her, it shifts the power completely. She realizes you're not waiting, you're living, and nothing makes someone rethink their choices more than seeing the one they thought would always be there thriving without them. That is why in the battle of silence, time is not something to dread. It is the very thing that secures your victory. The final key point in the no contact versus no contact battle is about understanding that silence is not just a lack of words, it's a powerful form of communication in itself. Many people mistake silence for weakness, thinking that if they don't speak up, they're losing the game. But in reality, silence often speaks louder than any message you could send because it forces the other person to fill in the gaps with their own thoughts, fears, and emotions. When you say nothing, you create space for the other person to wonder, to question, and eventually to confront the weight of your absence. When you break no contact too early, you reveal your cards. You let her know that your emotions control you, that you can't handle the unknown, and that you'll always be the one to bridge the gap. But when you stay silent, you're sending a different message altogether, that you are confident, patient, and in control. You're showing her that your self-worth isn't tied to her reactions, her approval, or even her presence in your life. That level of emotional control is rare and it commands respect. Silence is also a mirror. It forces the other person to reflect on their own actions and decisions. If she pushed you away, tested you, or tried to manipulate you, your silence doesn't argue, doesn't justify, doesn't beg. It simply reflects her behavior back to her. In that quiet space, she's left to sit with the reality of what she's done. Many times that reflection is more powerful than anything you could have said. But the most important part is that silence protects your dignity. Words spoken in frustration, in desperation, or in fear can't be taken back. They often do more damage than good. But silence keeps you steady, calm, and untouchable. It prevents you from chasing, pleading, or lowering yourself just to get a response. It preserves your position and reminds you that true strength is not in fighting for attention, it's in walking away with self-respect intact. Over time, she will notice that silence. She will feel it in ways that words could never reach. She will compare it to the constant noise of others who chase, beg, and seek validation, and she will recognize that your quiet strength is something different. That difference makes her think, and more often than not, it makes her come back, because silence communicates a simple but powerful truth. You are a man who cannot be controlled, who cannot be swayed by games, and who knows his value. And in the end, that's what the silent battle is all about, not winning against her, but winning within yourself. When you master silence, you master control over your emotions, your actions, and your destiny. that victory is far greater than any text or call could ever give you.